Yeah, hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In this video I'd like to look at a Holy Grail trade setup, or what I consider a Holy Grail trade setup, using the RT add-ons for, or the MTPredictor RT add-ons for NinjaTrader 7. That's what I'm looking at here. But before I start, I'd like to just quickly look at how a standard trader would view this TS3 buy setup here. Remember, standard traders use the colour of the STF, so in this case red means a downtrend, therefore standard traders would not be considering this because it's a buy setup. But as an advanced trader, there's a technique or a particular setup that I teach, which I call my Holy Grail trade setup, which we use to look for trade setups like this. So first of all, I'd like to go through what makes this setup a Holy Grail trade setup, so you can use this to find Holy Grail trade setups in the future. It all depends and all comes down to where this TS3 setup arrives. Now, what is a TS3 setup? If I hover over this bar, right mouse click to Elliott Wave Intermediate, you can see it's an ABC pattern. So what we're looking for in the Holy Grail trade setup is this ABC pattern to unfold as the first correction. Now, correction is a move against an otherwise prior trend, so this entire swing down here is a correction to this move up. Okay, remember this move up here. So what we're looking for is this to be the first correction against the first move off an important high or low. So that is the real starting point. What we have to look at is, does this TS3 buy setup follow on from a correction that follows on from a move that follows on from an important high or low? So if we go back to the start, how do we start to look for Holy Grail trade setups? Well, we have to look for an important high or low, and the way we determine that is the larger degree chart, where we use our DPs and WPTs. So this is a 3-minute chart of the YM, so if I go and change it to a 15-minute chart, what I want to do is, if I put a bit of extra space on here so we can have a bit of extra space to work with. If we go here and I scroll back, so this is before this day even started. This was Friday the 13th, January 2012. So before we even started, I want to show you how the DPs particularly can be used to project in advance. That's the important point, project in advance support zones. And if we look at the chart here we can see we have a swing going up into this high. So if we go back to the start of the swing, we can see that this is an important pivot. So if we right mouse click and we put our DP off this pivot, you can see we have a DP come on the chart here. You could also do one off this level here, and I'll put this on as well just so you can see. But the point being is that this level is an important support zone. So if we go forward to this low here, you can see that we actually went through this first support zone. But if I now come on here and I draw a rectangle at the same level as this, so I extend the DP out a little bit, you can see that the market came down here and tagged this support zone right at this very low here. So that's the first thing we look at, is whether the market is making an initial rally off an important prior high or low. And the way we determined whether a swing is an important prior high or low is we go to the higher time frame and see whether we have DP support coming off that pivot. And as you can see here, it's very easy with the tools in MTPredictor, because I simply clicked on this pivot, got our DP level, and here we can see this was projected into the future, and here is the low coming in. So let's go to the 3-minute chart now. And as you can see, we've because I've drawn that rectangle in NinjaTrader, it was left on that on the 3-minute chart. So that's the first point, or the first tick that we have on whether a setup is a Holy Grail trade setup, is, are we coming off important support in this example? And as you can see here, we are, because this zone here is 15-minute DP support, in other words support on the higher time frame. So this move up here would be considered a wave 1. This correction down here would be considered a wave 2. If I right mouse click and I put the Elliott Wave Major on, you can see this is confirmed by the software, so 1 or A down into 2 or B. If I now put the Elliott Waves on the intermediate degree, you can see that this moved down into the larger wave 2 or B, subdivides into A, B, C. This is the criteria for the Holy Grail trade setup. So what makes this unique? Well, because it's the first move of an important, or the first correction of the first move of an important high or low, this correction down here would be considered a wave 2. So how does this change our analysis of our normal standard MTPredictor trade setups? Well, first of all, because it's a wave 2, it's always going to be early in the new trend, therefore it will always be against the STF. So this is the main trade setup, or the main trade setup that the advanced MT predictors look at that actually goes against the STF colour. And this is the first advanced trade setup we teach to take standard traders above and beyond just the automatic setups. The second thing is we don't look for our first target. As you see here, the first target would have been a good result with a nice 4.5 hour profit, but this is only the minimum wave C WPT. The next one is the typical wave C. The third one is actually the typical wave 3. Okay, that's the important point. Why is that important? Because this initial move here we consider a wave 1. This move down here we consider a wave 2. Therefore, with a Holy Grail trade setup, we're anticipating that if I put the risk reward on, we're anticipating that the market is going to go to the typical wave 3 WPT. So instantly you can see that rather having a target here, which was a nice 4.5R, we go up for a target here which is potentially 12R, which actually is a massive return in relation to the initial risk. And this is why these trade setups are so good, is because you get in right at the end of a wave 2, in other words right at the start of a wave 3. A wave 3 is usually the strongest and longest wave in Elliott wave in any completed Elliott wave sequence, so this represents the largest profit for the smallest initial risk. In other words, it's the best trade in the book, and it's why MTPredictor was actually designed to start with over 10 years ago now, and it's the favourite trade setup that I look for and have done in my 25 years worth of trading. So let's scroll forward now, and the market went up, went up, went up, and actually the end of the day was here, so we didn't quite get to our target. But if we put the risk reward on where we were as of the end of the day, so we just do one click, and you can see here second click, it's telling you where you do your clicks. Third click at the target point, which actually is the close of the day there. You can see it actually gave you a return of 9.4R. In other words, this profit here was at about $3,600, was approximately 9 times greater than the initial risk. That is a brilliant example of why this Holy Grail trade setup is so good, because the wave 3 in a completed 5-wave sequence being the longest represents the largest potential profit for the smallest initial risk. This is why it's my favourite trade setup. So just to go through again, how do we identify this? Well, first and foremost, for a standard trader, these setups will always be against the STF colour. So how do we know it's a Holy Grail trade setup and not just to take any old setup that's against the STF? Well, for this we go to the largest degree trend. So in this case, from the 3-minute chart we go to our 15-minute chart. We put our DPs on from prior pivots. We then look for a market coming down into, in this case, 15-minute support. If it was a sell setup, it would be 15-minute resistance, which we had at the low of the day on Friday the 13th. We then come back to our 3-minute chart, and what we look for, if I put the analysis on, it shows you very clearly. Whoops, just want the analysis on there. So what we look for is the market making important support, which it did here. We're then looking for the initial rally off that support. That would be considered a wave 1 in Elliott wave terms. The initial correction to that initial move will be considered a wave 2. The wave 2 has to subdivide into A, B, C. All of this is found by the software automatically for you. This means that this low is a wave 2. Therefore, rather than coming out at the first target, we look to play for the third target, which is here, which is our typical wave 3 WPT, and that gives us the Holy Grail trade setup, where we're taking a trade to catch the strongest and longest wave in a completed Elliott wave sequence, all for the smallest initial risk. And that is why this is my favourite trade setup.